Diablo II Resurrected has for a while now been on my list of most anticipated games, basically ever since I, and everyone else, first heard leaked reports indicating it was in some form of development. For the record, I never played the original Diablo II, as back in those days when Diablo II was first released, I was playing games almost exclusively on console, aside from playing the original EA-developed Harry Potter games on PC. Well, in Monopoly 1995 or whatever, but I don't think that really counts as a game by today's standards. But I was quite a big fan of the third Diablo game when I first tried playing that several years ago, shortly before Overwatch was first released in 2016. So I jumped into Diablo II Resurrected through the perspective of a newcomer in essence. And it's certainly been an interesting experience, especially on day one. As of me first putting my notes together in preparation for this video on the day of its release, Diablo II Resurrected is bordering on the verge of being completely unplayable. I put in an initial few hours of play before hopping off for a bit to go make my lunch. When I came back, I found my saved character completely inaccessible, with the BattleNet launcher displaying an error message declaring that the team is aware of a technical issue involving character creation and loading in pre-made characters. This is, in of itself, not a end-of-the-world crisis. It's a small, minor annoyance, a petty grievance. Or at least it would be if it wasn't that one additional straw that broke the camel's back in terms of my experience with the game. I'm not going to beat around the bush here. As far as attempting to recapture the essence of that very dated, early 2000s feel that defined Diablo II, the team over at Vicarious Visions have done an excellent job on the look and feel of the game. I do want to obviously give them full credit for that, but I have to wonder whether they may have done too good a job in some areas. Remasters and remakes are often a difficult thing to attempt at the best of times, given the usually very passionate nature of the fanbase, which can lead to an outpouring of unnecessary toxicity if the new remaster or remake fails to meet the expectations of long-standing fans. But the task is made far more laborious when the developers and executives at Blizzard, along with their marketing team, blur the line unnecessarily between what the game actually is versus what it's marketed as. Some have claimed this game is just a remaster, bringing nothing new to the table except updated models and animations. Except this is easily disproved given the complete abandonment of the traditionally 2D perspective of the original game, the addition of all new fully animated CGI cutscenes, and the many changes to the core gameplay. Not to mention Blizzard's intent to turn this game into another live service title, including new content over time that was never in the original game. I need hardly state that the original game was not a live service game, so to say that this is a one-for-one remaster as opposed to a remake, I take issue with that claim. But that said, on the flip side, others have claimed that this is a complete remake on a fundamental level, shaking up Diablo II to its very core, possibly going out of their way to completely do away with how people have come to experience it in the past, in favor of trying to draw in a whole new generation of players. Whatever way you slice it, Blizzard has, from a PR perspective, done a very poor job indeed of illustrating to the general public what exactly this game is supposed to be, or more accurately, who the intended audience of this game is supposed to be. Before we go any further, I do want to vividly state, so there's no confusion whatsoever, that this is a first impressions video, not a review, technically speaking. As of now, I've completed the first act of the game and I've made some initial progress into the second act. So take what I'm saying with a degree of salt, though keep in mind the fact that the Diablo 2 community is a pretty diehard one. I'm pretty sure they're going to be directing far more than a small degree of salt towards me for making this video, but screw 'em. The controls are dreadful and borderline unresponsive, at least once per minute, oftentimes more than once. The character will just stop walking or running for no reason, to return to a dead halt, despite me holding down the mouse and moving it in the indicated direction. The character will just sometimes spontaneously decide of its own volition that it doesn't want to do anything, at least momentarily. But in many instances, especially in dungeons, this can and sometimes automatically will result in your character's imminent demise, as this allows enemies to just swarm around you and prevent you from moving. But we'll get to that later. Melee combat here is, at best, completely unsatisfying when it actually does work, and in most cases is outright mechanically broken. The hitboxes are downright ridiculous. Enemies can stab you with spears or slash you with claws from seemingly about 5 feet away, but conversely, when I click on an enemy to stab or slash at them, more than half the time I'd say that probably 60 or 70% of the time my attacks will guaranteed miss, even in instances where the attack animation itself indicates that the attack appeared to have landed. Attempting to attack with literally any kind of melee weapon is inherently counterproductive when there are far more efficient means of combat, mainly the use of magic via your mana pool. I've not spent much time with bows and arrows overall, so I can't really speak to the effectiveness or lack thereof with projectile weapons, but I would certainly avoid the melee weapons if I were you. Many of the core game systems, such as the user's inventory screen, were never designed with user-friendliness in mind, and would greatly have benefited from some degree of modernization. Identical items, with exception of certain scrolls, cannot be stacked within the inventory screen to save space, and neither can items be rotated in order to maximize the efficiency of the currently available space. Resurrected sadly will not let you play Tetris with your inventory items, resulting oftentimes in unnecessary frequent trips back to your home base in order to sell a number of items in order to reclaim much needed inventory space. Either that, or you better get used to your character spamming the "I don't have room for that, I don't have room for that" voice line every time you try to pick up anything in a level or dungeon. Quests don't give you much direction and also tend to be very repetitive. Almost all the quests follow the same formula of go to this dungeon, make your way through multiple floors of said dungeon, kill the dungeon boss, get the specified quest item, and then return to the NPC who gave you the quest. I'm sure this was the same in the original game, but just because something was innovative in 2002 or 2003 doesn't necessarily mean it gets a pass in 2021. Vendor-bought items are overwhelmingly terrible, and there seems to be no clear way to upgrade vendor shops to make them more efficient for higher-level use, as was the case in Diablo III, making vendors essentially useful only for extremely low-level players. Once you're around level 12 or 15, you'll mostly only be using vendors as a means of offloading the massive amount of loot that, as I've already mentioned, you'll be rapidly accumulating over the course of a single dungeon or quest. Loot itself is very generic, with very little in the way of interesting, unique characteristics. The only way to get interesting weapons is by imbuing your existing weapons to make them far deadlier, which you can do only once, which is pretty stupid. Enemy placement is downright dreadful. There are frequently enormous sections of the land where absolutely no one and nothing is in sight, which is because, like Diablo 3, the game prefers to clump every possible enemy into one or two enormous clusters. You might get a few encounters where there's only a handful of lone enemies, but by and large, the enemy placement seems to have been designed around a feast or a famine approach, which I don't think really works to the game's credit in this instance. Friendly AI companions are absolutely useless. The fact that they do not share an identical inventory screen to yours, but rather a separate, far more minimalistic one, actively prevents you from being able to customize them and supply them nearly as well as you'd like. And they seem restricted to only fighting using their primary attack. There does not seem to be any use of a secondary attack, like what the player has access to themselves. Or if the AI does have the ability to cast secondary attacks, I've yet to see any evidence of it. There is little in the way of knockback or escape abilities in the game, meaning if, during any instance of combat, you suddenly find yourself surrounded by enemies, even if they're fairly minor enemies, you will almost certainly die due to your inability to move or otherwise dodge incoming damage on all sides. And as if to make an already bad situation worse, if you do die in-game, your body will not appear anywhere on the map until your character has already walked into that room or other immediate area, making it unbelievably tedious to retrieve all of your fallen items in larger dungeons, which tend to be very populated with enemies. Overall, I'm just going to go on record saying this. Diablo II Resurrected, from the perspective of a solo player looking to play through the game without having to rely on written walkthrough articles or other players collaborating with me, the game is an absolutely unforgivable, horrible experience. Diablo II Resurrected is single-handedly one of the worst online hack-and-slash action RPG titles of this current generation, and I refuse to recommend it to anyone looking to play it on their own. If you have a party to play with you, all the better to you, but if you're playing this on your own, stay away from this game. Literally any game on the market is made better by having your friends play with you, so I'm not going to give the game any credit or wiggle room for merely being playable in multiplayer. If the game is functionally not playable, in essence, for single player, playing with friends does not make that game automatically good. Being better than dreadful is not much of a compliment still. While I'm aware there are plans in place for subsequent updates and possible expansions via the live service post-launch model that Activision Blizzard supposedly has in place for this game, I personally can't imagine any single update that will ever entice me to return to this game again. Do not buy this game, hand on heart. Everything about Resurrected convinces me that if you weren't already a fan of the original classic game, this remake will not do anything to even try to win you over. I'm all for challenging games that have a moody, dark aesthetic, but honestly, there are way better options on the market. Buy it if you will, you do you. If you love it, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, but for me, this game is definitely going up on my personal metaphorical top 10 list for worst games of 2021. As the few pros, and the game does have its pros, in no way, shape, or form comes remotely close to matching up with the overwhelming slew of cons that have resulted in this unbridled mess of an experience. And on that note, pleasant as it may sound, that's where I'm going to wrap it up for today. As ever, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button and comment below what you think of the game. I'm sure my opinions are sure to spark some debate and conversation, and I welcome it if you disagree with me. I want to hear why. Let's play nice, but obviously, we can be free to disagree. Also, I won't lie, comments really help get my videos boosted in the algorithm. Plus, I read and respond to basically everything I get. So if you just want to drop a comment to say hi or get my opinion on something unrelated if you want, I'll be more than happy to talk to you either way. This is WarriorDan signing out. Stay awesome, everybody. Stay safe and peace out.